how do you get all these things together and start living a productive and a manageable life again after you've figured out how to get the mind to working properly? If you struggle with anxiety or depression, first of all, I'm not a professional, but I am a sojourner or someone who's been there with you. Something I've dealt with on one level or another as long as I can remember. Some of it was harder than others, and then there was times when I didn't really realize that I was responding in a trauma or depression or anxiety way, but through some counseling with the VA, went through PTSD counseling, and I actually chose to do the CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, which if you're a veteran, you've got some problems, or even if you're not, you've got some anxiety, depression problems, CBT is pretty good. But I have to put the disclaimer on there for my Christian brothers and sisters that there is some parts of this that doesn't line up with our beliefs, because they like to kind of run into a little bit of the Buddhist and Hindu kind of, visualization. You just have to walk softly. There's Christian counselors out there, but if you're a veteran, the VA is a good place to start. If you're in Gainesville, Alachua, Lake City, the VA here in Gainesville, my therapist was one of the best I'd ever had, and I've had a couple. So let's get into this. So what is one of the hardest parts about counseling? Number one, I think, is going. Number two is taking it serious. Number three is actually admitting that you have a problem. It's almost like a rehabilitation thing. Because what anxiety and depression likes to do, what not being mindful, not being in control of your mind likes to do, it likes to say that everyone else is wrong and you're right. Well, that kind of runs the line with narcissism and a lot of emotional and mental disorders or dysregulated things in your mind. But I'm not here to fight the fight of what is mental health and what is a disease and if it's curable or if it's just thought up. I know that my trauma was from a long, long time ago, like way before I ever got in the military. Now, there was a couple of situations in the military that I had to deal with. I didn't get taught how to deal with emotions, reality, in a lot of ways when I was young, or I put some glasses on when I was young and I wrote rules. So I talked about this before, the difference between a small child or a young child is egocentric. Okay, they everything happens because of them or for them. So if something goes right, it's because of them and for them, and if it goes wrong, it's because of them or for them. They can't differentiate between things that are out of their control and in their control, because they are the world. They are everything. And usually, we can look back, and as a young kid, we were very demanding because all our needs had to be met by someone else. There's a natural progression from the egocentric lifestyle of a child, and that goes into adolescence. And then when you go into adolescence and you go through puberty and hormones on both sides, male and female, start to happen, we come out of, and of course, a couple of failures at school, the cool crowd and the uncool crowd, we start realizing very, very quickly that the world is actually the world and we are not it, and things don't revolve around us. We kind of have to fit in where we can get in some places, and we're just not going to be the priority for everybody. Now, a childhood trauma, which I experienced quite a few of them, locks you into some of these thought patterns that's hard to get your lens cleaned off. So it's like if your 3-year-old self was sitting at the desk trying to read your work, it wouldn't work. But what we allow to happen is that we allow our younger or our trauma age self make the decisions about things that are happening today, and we use the lens of that egocentric mentality where everything happens because of me and for me. And what we end up doing is losing our place in reality. We are not where our feet are. We can become extremely self-absorbed and self-centered and start looking at the world as if we are a victim and that we have no control over the bad or the good. I'm not going to get into the semantics here, but I want to talk to you about one part of my therapy and maybe get some of you over the hump and get you excited to sit down with someone. And I'm a firm believer. I grew up in the life coach and Tony Robbins and, these guys that just know how to motivate, knew how to excite and refresh. And it's been a thing since before we were a thing. There's nothing new underneath the sun, but there is something refreshing about being able to sit down and be reminded of some truths, even if some of them truths are someone else's. The motivational speaking kind of people like to hand you some of their truth and hand you some of their success to maybe spark you into moving. What I want to do is spark you into saying, hey, look, maybe I do need to get a sales coach. Maybe I do need to get a mentor to stand in this gap with me. I'm failing somewhere, or I'm not, or I believe I'm not living up to my expectations, or I feel like I've hit a ceiling. There's nothing wrong with having someone coach you. It seems like we leave high school and college, if you went to college, and then all the educational stuff is now taboo. You can't have a coach to help you with sales. You can't have a coach to help you be better at your job or teach you how to swing a golf club. We had coaches that taught us how to dribble, how to hit a baseball, and how to do math problems when we were in school, and it was acceptable. But for some reason, we walk out of this 12-year institution and believe we've got it figured out, when really we don't even have the start. My push for you is that it's okay to seek help, no matter what level of help it is that you're looking for. If you're depressed, if you have anxiety, if you have negative things going on in your mind all the time, and you're consistently only seeing the negative in life, there's a problem. You need to get it helped. And a lot of times help is perspective. It's hard to have perspective when you're in the surf. I was very fortunate to be in Hawaii when I was in the Marine Corps. I'd go out to the North Shore, and all these guys in the winter there, it gets rough, and that's when all the big waves come in. You see these people who are really good at what they do, and they know how to manage the surf, and they know how to get up onto the board, and they're familiar with all this stuff. And they always said, you always default down to the highest level you've been trained. If you don't know how to do the small stuff, then there's no way you're going out there and tackling a 10-foot wave and trying to ride it, because there's a lot more going on than the 10-foot wave. There's undertow. There might not be any water at the bottom of that wave. There's plenty of stuff that only people who have been there, done that, and have been successful at it. And I'm not saying success as in they are an all-star in whatever, is that sometimes success is learning what didn't work. I believe we're a very self-absorbed, self-centered, self-regulating society right now. We just don't ask for help as much as we should. And there is people out there, me included, my buddy Wade, we are willing to tell you where we messed up so you don't make the same mistake. I don't want to stand over you, looking down on you as some kind of superior. I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and try to help you avoid some of the things that I've had to deal with. So going back to this crazy idea of me being in therapy, I was a 7-time failure of therapy. I always found something wrong with them. Well, some of you, most people watching these videos might not know, I was a law enforcement officer for the Navy. A lot of what I've done in the military and in between, just the people who I did it with knows it. It's not a lot of things that I believe. There's a lot of people who believe they know what I did. Maybe it's wrong or right that I don't correct them. There's a consequence for being in a relationship. And if you're in a relationship, then these conversations come up. If you're not, then they won't come up. I carried this childhood trauma. And then when I was in the Marine Corps, something extremely bad happened to me. So I was just dragging this on. Finally, I'd kind of hit that bottom of the bottom and ended up 80 pounds overweight. I was taking a lot of antidepressants that wasn't working and couldn't advocate for myself. So they were harming me and I didn't know how to step away from it. Every single relationship I had was strained, but mainly the one with myself was the one that was the most strained. I didn't like me. And I came to realize that I didn't like me a long time ago. So that wasn't like a new one, but I'd found a new level of hate for myself because nothing I did seemed to work. I was trapped in two different sides of the world. I had enough knowledge about investigations and how to talk to people, and I was decent at sales, but I was never really good at anything besides being maybe a police officer and, helping people learn how to do that. I think I might have been decent, maybe was decent at, helping people join the Navy. I woke up one morning, I realized that I had not lived up to my potential. I'm not saying that I wasn't successful, and I'm not saying that the things I did were bad. I just had a different standard for myself, and I always just pushed that standard off on, I don't have the equipment, I'm not good enough. The way I thought about myself, the way I acted around myself, and how I treated myself it sounds like a lot of self. And it sounds very absorbed. Well, because it is. It was very, very self-absorbed and very dangerous. And it almost cost me my life a few times. I thought that was rock bottom, but that wasn't even close. That was the beginning. And I believe now, looking back, that was a foundation being set for me to get back into my Bible, get back into my relationship with my Creator God, to find that relationship with Jesus Christ. But that wasn't it. I knew a lot about the Bible and a lot about a lot of things. I didn't know how to fix this and how to just feel okay. I met with this counselor. She was probably 15 years younger than me. I wasn't a very good counselee for a long, long time. It sucked. I wasted a lot of her time, a lot of my time, but then I did finally hit the point where it was time for me to change. I was either going to change or things were going to get really bad. I was at a point where you can't do sales jobs if you can't get out of the bed. You can't do any job if you can't get out of the bed. I went from a person that was a high functioning, up at 4 a.m, in the bed at midnight, go, 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 to completely paralyzed. I didn't golf. I didn't go out with friends. I didn't do anything. If it wasn't I did the bare minimum in every spot in my life. And after that, it was over. Didn't do anything else. I put all these fences up around myself and around these activities. And I made everything too hard. Even swinging a golf club, going to the driving range with a $5 bucket of golf balls turned into like I was going to have to negotiate a hostage deal with the FBI. And I know that sounds exaggerated, but it wasn't. So through probably the bigger part, the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of pulls back the curtains and pulls back all these things. You got to identify the way you think, you got to identify the way you feel, and you got to identify the reality, where your feet are. So you got to be where your feet are. Part of this was called exposure therapy because I had and still do struggle with, which is going to shock a few people, a very, very high sense of fear of not being liked or being accepted. I'll give you a minute because most people would say I'm a bull in a china shop. I don't care what anyone thinks. I just go, go, go. Well, that's the persona that someone who is afraid of failure, afraid of coming off incorrectly or not being holistically accepted by everybody. That should be a mental disorder in itself because you can't make everyone happy. Was sitting there in this CBT training and I ran face first into the fact that I had created a world that wasn't worth living in, and really I wasn't living in it. I think no matter if you've got, depression or anxiety or problems, mental health issues, I think running a journal is good for any human being. Try it. It's difficult. It's a learned behavior. Well, here's how jacked up Ray was, is I had to run a positive journal and a negative journal. So it means I could only put negative things in the negative journal. I had to only put positive things in the positive journal. Yes, it took me out of a year and 18 months worth of counseling. It took me probably 7 months of that to get to where I could put more in the positive journal than it was in the negative. Just because the way my mind was wired is that I looked through the lens of negativity, even if I responded and operated in the world as if there was hope and there was possibility and there was positivity. Deep in here, lights out. Didn't really fully believe it. And I think that was very, very obvious. And I was a lot more transparent to what I thought. Some of the folks that know me would say, they probably look back and say, man, I always thought Ray was going to do, and then it's not what I'm doing. And the reason is because when you're hiding from yourself, you end up hiding from people around you. One of them arrows that she threw at me in this was exposure therapy. This is one of the hardest therapy sessions, 2 weeks I've ever had, and I still do it to this day. I do a weekly exposure therapy to keep myself strong mentally. What exposure therapy was is that I took something I didn't want to do or something that wasn't harmful for me, that I enjoyed at one time in my life, but I'd written it out of my life, like going to play golf by myself. I'd written it off as just a business thing, and I could only do it with other people. I wasn't being a good father or a good husband or a good this or that if I went and played. Just nonsense. I got to the point where I had some problems with even walking into a church. And there's people would say, what? I've street preached in California with Ray Comfort and his team. I talk to people at gas pumps about Jesus. That's not something that anyone would say is like, hey, Ray, what do you mean? It seems like you'd be kicking the doors in to get into the assembly. But my illness, not a disease, my illness and my perspective, my lenses that I was looking through life from, I'd already wrote off all these people and I'd already made up my mind what they were going to do and how things were going to happen. And of course, it wasn't positive. There was nothing good about it. So one part of this was that, and this is the cool fact, so we're kind of turning this down just a little bit so y'all can get back to your day. One part of this was I asked for a discount everywhere I went. Now, I didn't do this with my wife around me because my wife's introverted. She's very, very tenderhearted, and I don't want to put her into a place where there's kind of like a conflict. But even saying that, it was very rare that it was ever a conflict. I asked for a discount no matter where I went if there was a person that was communicating with me through the sale. And all it was is to prove to myself that asking for things doesn't immediately get you written off and someone beating you with a hammer or a baseball bat. They're not going to go to social media with a photo of you and saying, this jerk asked me for a discount at Five Guys. It just doesn't happen. What does happen is it puts you in a very uncomfortable situation. And if you're a businessman or you're in sales, I challenge you to do this, because here's the problem. You get asked for discounts all the time. Matter of fact, it's not usually a discount you get asked for. You get asked for it for free. Well, can you give me this? Can you give me that? And when I was running my roofing company, people wanted me to give them labor for free. I'm like, what? I didn't like that, and I didn't really feel great about them asking that. But in the reality of it, I kind of accepted it as them just like the 3-year-old asking for a cookie 1,000 times. They're just trying to get what they can get, and they don't know what's available. Through this month or two of me doing this, what I found out is a lot of people that work at the counter don't really know what discounts are available. So it freezes them up. I got a lot of discounts in a lot of different places. Sometimes it was $1, sometimes it was 5%. I think it's a good challenge, because you sometimes don't do things and the exposure of it because of what other people's reaction could be, and you place way too much emphasis on their response. So another part of this exposure therapy was I was supposed to get into a conversation that stood up for myself, or I challenged someone's opinion or their stance on something, no matter if it was the right time. So I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Ray, yeah, you should have been hit in the face there. No. It stopped me from advocating for myself, and it stopped me from asking questions and drawing lines and, just being a person with boundaries. That's got me into some deep water, and it's exposed maybe some trauma and some problems in other people. The fastest way to expose another human being on some of their deficiencies is unintentionally back them into a corner with truth, even if that truth maybe comes at a time where they don't understand the reason why it happened, but it still did. So what does this all mean, Ray? Well, what this means is that there's hope. There is hope for us. There's hope for you. There's hope for everybody. If you're looking at a child, or you're looking at a spouse, or you're looking at a buddy, or you're looking at one of your girlfriends that you hang out with, and boy, they can participate, but there's something there that just doesn't work all the time. Be tender with them. Be slow with them and be courteous to them, but set your boundaries. I think probably would have helped me the most when I was in the worst of this was certain people, meaning some of the closer people to me, would probably had benefit from setting some boundaries, which would have made my life a little bit more uncomfortable, and I would have found a way to fix it sooner. This is not something that is impossible to get through or to get over. Here's the big story, and what I do every day. And it was a manipulation of a podcast from Bedros Keuilian and my counselor in CBT, because both of these kind of ran into each other. Both, he was saying some things that she said some things he said. So I'm assuming it's a common therapy or a common talking point, but it's the difference between bears and dragons. Dragons, mythical creatures, and then there's bears, and bears are, yes, ultimately dangerous, pretty loud if you wake them up or scare them. But us as human beings, we do have some defense mechanisms from them. We can step away. We can use some bear spray. There's a lot of different things, but how they translated this to me and it was a little bit of self-therapy in taking two different things from therapy and from a trusted podcast with Bedros. I was treating the bears of life like dragons. I was treating the common everyday problems that everyone has to go through, that the budgeting stinks, the job is hard, what's for dinner, why is there a dent in the car, why is the dryer not working? These small things, well, not small because some of them are difficult, that seem life-threatening to someone that's already on edge. We can take the bears of life, a budget, or trying to save some money. We take the bears of life, the things that everyone else is having to deal with. Everyone deals with bears. The bears are different for certain people, but everyone has to deal with them. What you do is you deal with them. You either get the bear out of your way or you get out of the bear's way, and you continue on with life. Now, the dragons are not the same. They're not everyday things. These are the divorces, the bankruptcies, the loss of a child, the loss of a family member, trauma. These are dragons. These are things that don't happen to everybody. That it is an individual, if it's consequential or if it's just by happenstance, you have to deal with it, and it is a big deal for you. you have to deal with these differently than what you would do a bear. But what we end up doing is that we get so many of these dragons coming at us. I mean, we have to bankruptcy, you lose your house, you lose your job. These dragons that you're fighting all the time because they're independent individual wars that you're having to fight. Your own mental state, that can be a dragon. It can be the worst thing for you. Now we flip the switch and then a bear shows up. There's a flat tire. There's a screw in the garbage disposal. Love you, Joy. There is these small bears that show up that we know how we know we can manage them. We know we can get through them, but we treat them like dragons. So what I want you to do for the next week until the next time we meet is stop making dragons everything. Fight the bears as bears. Get through them, know people are having to deal with them, and move on, because there is no stopping the bears from coming. Not every action or negative thing that happens to you is a bear. But when the dragons come, you have to be prepared, and you have to have a source, and you got to have some people on your team. But if you're over there losing your mind every time a bear jumps out, and the bear meaning I got a speeding ticket or I got 3 hours cut out of my paycheck because I broke something at work, that's bears. That is things that you just have to deal with them, but we can't respond to them like they're dragons. So you got to be where your feet are. You got to treat the dragons like dragons, and you got to treat the bears like bears. You got to fight these battles on two different planes. You got to fight them a different way because they both are fought different ways. Now, you might use some of the techniques of fighting a bear to fight the dragon, but most of the time, the dragon's coming at you. There's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have to experience the wrath of that dragon, and you're going to have to wait through it. If you need some help, I'm going to put the hotline up here if you think that your life's not worth living. If you need help, please get it. If you want to be better, please find someone to help you. There is no one that's self-made. There is people who are self-taught. And there is people that don't use a lot of help, but even Michael Jordan got breaks. Michael Jordan had a coach. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Larry Bird, Bo Jack, all these people had amazing people standing there with them. They allowed the people who knew the most about it to help them. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because it doesn't make you look weak. So until the next time, do not let your dragons get treated like bears, and don't fight bears like dragons, because they're two different things. You are important. There's a reason why you are here. And if you don't understand what that is, tune in to the next time, because we are going to be diving into the Bible, business, mental health, the whole arena of what 50 years of living in this skin has afforded me in lessons of fighting the bears and the dragons. Till next time, have a good one.